The P-51 Mustang was on fire and falling. The controls were gone. The canopy was jammed. Lieutenant Marcus Webb had maybe 15 seconds before the fighter disintegrated around him. He kicked the canopy release 3 times. Nothing. The flames were crawling toward the cockpit. Through the smoke, he could see German countryside spinning below. He had one chance left. One insane, impossible chance that would either save his life or end it in the next 10 seconds. He stopped fighting the canopy and reached for his sidearm instead. What he did in the next 6 hours would become one of the most audacious escape stories of the entire war. A story so improbable that intelligence officers initially refused to believe it. A story that would be classified for 30 years because no one wanted the enemy to know it was possible. If you want more true stories of impossible moments from World War II, subscribe to the channel. This happened on September 23, 1944, deep inside Germany, 40 miles southeast of Berlin. The mission was a long-range bomber escort to an industrial complex near Dresden. 60 B-17s, with a fighter screen of 32 P-51s. The 8th Air Force had been bleeding aircraft over Germany for months. The Luftwaffe was desperate, dangerous, and willing to die to stop the bombers. Every mission was a fight to the death. Lieutenant Marcus Webb was flying with the 357th Fighter Group out of RAF Leiston. He was 25 years old. He had grown up in West Texas on a cattle ranch, where the nearest neighbor was 11 miles away. His father raised cattle and broke horses. Webb learned to ride when he was 4. By the time he was 12, he could gentle a wild Mustang in 3 days. His father taught him one lesson above all others. When things go wrong, you don't freeze. You adapt. When Webb joined the Army Air Forces in 1942, he brought that mindset with him. During training, instructors noticed he had a strange calmness under pressure. When other cadets panicked during emergency simulations, Webb just worked the problem. Engine fire, shut down fuel, find a field land. Lost formation in clouds, check instruments, maintain heading, climb to clear air. His responses were always methodical, always practical. One instructor wrote in his file, "Webb doesn't rattle. Put him in an impossible situation, and he'll find the one way out nobody else saw." Webb arrived in England in May of 1944. The squadron veterans looked at him and saw another cowboy from Texas who probably thought flying was like riding horses. They weren't entirely wrong. Webb did approach flying like he approached breaking Mustangs. Stay calm. Read the situation. Don't fight what you can't control. Work with what you have. By September, he had flown 41 combat missions. He had 5 confirmed kills and 2 probables. He'd been hit 4 times and forced to abort twice. He was a solid pilot, competent, reliable, not flashy, but he brought his aircraft home. On September 23rd, he almost didn't. The mission brief that morning was grim. Deep penetration into Germany. Long flight time. Heavy flak concentrations. Expected Luftwaffe resistance. The group commander told them to stay tight, stay alert, and don't chase targets away from the bomber stream. Your job is to protect the heavies, he said, not to rack up kills. Webb's wingman was a lieutenant named Carmichael. Carmichael was young, 22, on his 9th mission. He was nervous. Before they took off, he asked Webb what to do if things went bad. Webb told him the same thing his father had told him about wild horses. Don't panic. Don't fight it. Just keep moving and find the opening. They took off at 0700 hours. 32 Mustangs formed up and headed east across the channel. The weather was clear. Visibility was good. Too good. The Luftwaffe would see them coming from 50 miles out. They crossed into Germany at 0915. The bombers droned ahead in tight formation. The fighters weaved above them. The radio chatter was tense. Everyone knew the Luftwaffe was waiting somewhere. At 0942, they found them. 18 Bf-109s came out of the sun in a near-vertical dive. They ignored the escorts and went straight for the bombers. Cannon fire ripped through the B-17 formation. 2 bombers exploded. One fell out of formation, trailing fire. The Mustangs broke to engage. Webb and Carmichael rolled left and climbed. A 109 flashed past them, too fast to engage. Webb looked for a target. The sky was chaos. Aircraft everywhere. Smoke trails. Tracer fire. The radio was a wall of screaming voices. A second wave of German fighters came in from the east. Focke-Wulf 190s. 12 of them. They hit the bombers from below. The escorts were already scattered. The bomber formation was coming apart. Webb saw a 190 lining up on a crippled B-17. He called it to Carmichael and Dove. The 190 was focused on the bomber. Webb closed to 400 yards and fired. Tracer fire walked into the 190's tail. The German fighter broke off and rolled right. Webb followed. The 190 pilot was good. He reversed hard and came back at Webb head-on. Both pilots fired. Webb felt rounds hit his wing. He kept his finger on the trigger. The 190's canopy shattered. The fighter rolled inverted and fell. Webb pulled up and looked for Carmichael. He was gone. The radio was too jammed to call him. Webb was alone in a sky full of enemies. He climbed back toward the bombers. A Bf-109 dropped in behind him. Webb saw him at the last second. He broke hard right. The 109 followed. Webb pulled into a climbing spiral. The 109 stayed with him. Webb's airspeed bled off. The Mustang shuddered. The 109 was closing. 200 yards. 150. Webb snap-rolled and dove. The 109 overshot. Webb reversed and fired. Short burst. The 109's engine exploded. The fighter nosed over and fell. 2 kills. But Webb's fuel was dropping fast. The hard maneuvering had burned through his reserves. He checked his gauges. Enough to make it back. Barely. He turned west and started to climb. That's when the third 109 hit him. It came from above and behind. Webb never saw it. The first burst of cannon fire tore through his right wing. The second burst hit the engine. The Merlin engine coughed, shuddered, and seized. Smoke poured from the cowling. The propeller stopped turning. The Mustang's nose dropped. Webb fought the stick. No response. The elevator controls were severed. The ailerons were sluggish. He had maybe partial rudder control. That was it. The fighter was falling, and there was nothing he could do about it. He reached for the canopy release. He pulled it. Nothing happened. He pulled again. The canopy didn't move. It was jammed. The frame was probably warped from the cannon hits. The altimeter unwound. 12,000 feet. 11,000. The smoke was getting thicker. He could feel heat through the firewall. The flames were spreading. He had 2 options. Stay in the aircraft and burn, or find a way out. He pulled his sidearm. A Colt 1911. He aimed at the canopy rail and fired 3 shots. The plexiglass cracked. He holstered the pistol, braced his feet against the rudder pedals, and shoved his shoulder against the canopy. It didn't move. He shoved again. Harder. The canopy shifted slightly. He put everything he had into it. The canopy frame bent, cracked, and finally tore free. The wind ripped it off the aircraft. Webb didn't hesitate. He unstrapped, pulled himself up, and jumped. The wind hit him like a freight train. He tumbled. Sky ground, sky ground. He reached for the ripcord and pulled. The parachute deployed. The harness jerked him upright. Suddenly everything was quiet. No engine noise. No wind roar. Just the sound of his own breathing and the distant rumble of aircraft above. He looked up. The dogfight was still raging 5,000 feet above him. He looked down. German countryside. Fields. Villages. Roads. He was drifting west, but he was still deep inside enemy territory. 40 miles from the nearest Allied lines. Maybe more. He pulled on the risers and tried to steer toward a forested area. If he could get into the trees, he might be able to evade capture long enough to move west. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He hit the ground hard in an open field. The parachute dragged him 20 feet before he got the harness release open. He rolled to his feet, gathered the chute, and looked around. No one in sight. He could hear a vehicle in the distance, maybe half a mile away. He ran for the tree line 200 yards to the north. He made it halfway before he heard the dogs. He stopped and turned. 3 German soldiers were coming across the field from the east. They had 2 shepherd dogs on leashes. The dogs were barking. The soldiers had rifles. One of them shouted something in German. Webb didn't speak German. But he understood the tone. "Stop, or we shoot." He raised his hands. The soldiers reached him 2 minutes later. One of them kept a rifle pointed at his chest, while the other two searched him. They took his sidearm, his knife, his compass, and his escape kit. One of them found his dog tags and read them. He said something to the others. They nodded. One of them gestured toward the road. Webb started walking. They marched him east for 20 minutes. They reached a small village. A Kubel wagon was parked near a church. An officer stood next to it, smoking a cigarette. He looked at Webb and said something to the soldiers. One of them responded. The officer nodded and flicked his cigarette away. He walked over to Webb and spoke in accented but clear English. "American pilot. P-51. Yes." Webb gave his name, rank, and serial number. Nothing else. The officer smiled. "You will be taken to a processing center, then to a prisoner camp. The war is over for you." Webb said nothing. The officer gestured to the Kubel wagon. "Get in." Webb climbed into the back seat. One soldier got in next to him. The other two got in the front. The officer stayed behind. The vehicle started moving. They drove east on a dirt road through farmland. Webb watched the landscape. Flat fields, scattered trees, a few farmhouses, no towns, no major roads. After 10 minutes, they turned onto a smaller road, heading north. The driver said something to the other soldier. They both laughed. The soldier next to Webb relaxed slightly. He lit a cigarette and looked out the window. Webb watched him. The rifle was leaning against the seat between them. The soldier's hand wasn't on it. Webb glanced at the driver. He was focused on the road. The soldier in the passenger seat was looking at a map. Webb made a decision. He didn't think about it. Thinking would have stopped him. He just moved. He grabbed the rifle, shoved the butt into the soldier's face, opened the door, and threw himself out of the moving vehicle. He hit the ground at 30 miles per hour. The impact drove the air from his lungs. He rolled 3 times and came up running. Behind him, the Kubel wagon skidded to a stop. Voices shouted. A shot rang out. The round hit the dirt 10 feet to his left. Webb ran for a drainage ditch 20 yards ahead. He dove into it and kept moving. The ditch was shallow, but it gave him cover. He crawled fast, keeping his head down. More shots. He could hear the soldiers shouting to each other. He reached a culvert under the road and crawled through. On the other side, he came up in a cornfield. The corn was tall, late-season growth. He got to his feet and ran. He didn't look back. He just ran. He ran for 10 minutes straight. His lungs burned. His legs felt like lead. He finally stopped behind a stone wall at the edge of the field and looked back. No one was following. Not yet. But they would come. They'd bring more soldiers. More dogs. He had maybe an hour before they organized a search. He needed to move west. Fast. But on foot, in enemy territory, wearing a flight suit. He wouldn't make it 5 miles before someone spotted him. He needed transportation. A vehicle. A bicycle. Anything. He moved west through fields and tree lines, staying low, avoiding roads. After 30 minutes, he saw a farm. Small. 1 barn. 1 house. A truck parked next to the barn. It looked old. Maybe a civilian vehicle. He watched the farm for 5 minutes. No movement. No sign of anyone. He moved closer. The truck was a pre-war Opel. Worn paint. Rust spots. The driver's door was unlocked. He climbed in and checked the ignition. No keys. He checked under the seat. Nothing. He checked the visor. Nothing. He was about to give up when he saw a toolbox in the truck bed. He climbed out, grabbed the toolbox, and opened it. Wire cutters, screwdrivers, pliers. He'd hotwired tractors back in Texas when the ignition keys went missing. A truck couldn't be that different. He climbed back into the cab, pulled the panel under the steering column, and went to work. 2 minutes later, the engine turned over. It coughed, sputtered, and caught. The truck rumbled to life. Webb put it in gear and drove. He turned onto a dirt road, heading west. He had no map, no plan. He just drove. The fuel gauge showed half a tank. That might get him 20 miles, maybe 30 if he was lucky. He drove for 15 minutes before he saw the airfield. It was small. A grass strip with 3 hangars and a control tower. No perimeter fence. No guards visible. And sitting on the flight line, alone, was a single aircraft. A Bf-109. Webb stopped the truck and stared. The 109 was sitting in the open, engine cowling propped open, like someone had been working on it and walked away. No ground crew visible. No pilots. No guards. An insane idea formed in his mind. He was a fighter pilot. He'd studied German aircraft recognition for months. He knew what a 109 looked like. He knew the basic layout. He'd even read captured Luftwaffe manuals during intelligence briefings. But knowing what an aircraft looked like and knowing how to fly it were 2 very different things. He sat in the truck for 30 seconds, weighing the options. On foot, he'd be captured in hours. In the truck, maybe a day. In a Bf-109, he could be back over Allied lines in 30 minutes. If he could get it started. If he could figure out the controls. If he didn't crash on takeoff. If the Luftwaffe didn't shoot him down before he made it across. A lot of ifs. But it was the only chance he had. He drove the truck toward the airfield. He parked it behind one of the hangars and walked toward the flight line. Still no one in sight. The airfield looked abandoned. Maybe everyone was at lunch. Maybe they'd been called away. It didn't matter. He reached the Bf-109 and climbed onto the wing. The cockpit was open. He looked inside. German instruments. German placards. Everything labeled in a language he didn't speak. But the basic layout was familiar. Stick, throttle, rudder pedals, fuel gauge, altimeter, airspeed. Every aircraft had the same fundamentals. He heard a voice behind him. He turned. A German mechanic was walking toward him from one of the hangars. The man was maybe 50 yards away. He was shouting something, probably asking what Webb was doing. Webb didn't answer. He climbed into the cockpit. The German mechanic broke into a run. He was shouting louder now, waving his arms. Webb ignored him. He dropped into the cockpit seat and scanned the instrument panel. Everything was in German. The placards, the gauges, the warning labels. He couldn't read any of it, but he could read the fundamentals. Fuel selector, mixture control, magneto switches, throttle. Every aircraft had the same basic systems. He just had to find them. The mechanic was 30 yards away now. Webb found what looked like the magneto switches. 2 toggles on the left side panel. He flipped them up. He found a fuel primer. A hand pump on the right side. He worked it 6 times. He grabbed what he hoped was the starter and gauge. The mechanic was 20 yards away. He was screaming. Webb could see other figures emerging from the hangars now. 2 more mechanics. Maybe a soldier. Webb pulled the starter. The engine turned over once. Twice. It coughed. Died. The mechanic was 10 yards away. He was reaching for something on his belt. Maybe a weapon. Maybe a radio. Webb primed the engine again. He adjusted what he thought was the mixture. He pulled the starter again. The Daimler-Benz engine roared to life. The propeller spun up. The mechanic stumbled backward from the prop wash. Webb didn't wait. He shoved the throttle forward. The 109 lurched ahead. The tail came up. He had no headset, no radio, no idea if the landing gear was even locked down. He was just moving. The aircraft accelerated across the grass. 30 knots. 40. The mechanic dove out of the way. Someone was shooting now. Webb heard rounds hit the fuselage. He kept the throttle forward. 50 knots. 60. The strip was short. Maybe 800 yards. He could see trees at the far end. 70 knots. The stick felt light. He pulled back gently. The nose lifted. The wheels left the ground. He was airborne. The 109 climbed. Webb pulled the gear lever. He heard something clank beneath him. The gear might have retracted. He wasn't sure. He didn't look. He just climbed. The engine was screaming. He had the throttle too far forward. He pulled it back slightly. The RPM dropped. The climb rate smoothed out. He was at 500 feet now. 1,000. 1,500. The airfield was falling away behind him. He checked his 6. No one was following. Yet, he turned west. He had no compass. No map. He was navigating by the sun and by memory. West meant Allied lines. West meant safety. If he could stay low. If he could avoid German fighters. If he could figure out how to land this thing when he got there. He leveled out at 3,000 feet. The 109 handled differently than the Mustang. Lighter, more responsive. The visibility was worse. The canopy framing blocked a lot of his view. But it flew. That was all that mattered. He scanned the instrument panel again. He found the fuel gauge. It showed 3/4 full. Maybe 40 minutes of flight time. He found the airspeed indicator. 280 kilometers per hour. He did the math in his head. About 170 miles per hour. Good cruising speed. Not too fast. Not too slow. He checked the sky around him. Empty. No aircraft. No contrails. Just open blue sky and patchy clouds below. He flew west for 10 minutes. The countryside scrolled beneath him. Fields. Villages. Roads. Rivers. He couldn't identify any of it. He just kept the sun on his right shoulder and flew straight. At 15 minutes, he saw smoke on the horizon. Big columns of black smoke rising into the sky. Bombing raid. Allied bombers had hit something. That meant he was getting closer to the front lines. The bombers wouldn't be this far east unless they'd hit a major target. He adjusted his course slightly south, away from the smoke, away from the flak batteries that would be active in that area. At 20 minutes, he heard an engine behind him. He looked back over his shoulder. 2 Bf-109s were closing from the east, maybe 2 miles back. They'd spotted him. They were coming fast. Webb's stomach dropped. He was flying a German fighter, but he was flying it in enemy airspace. Those pilots would assume he was either captured or a defector. Either way, they'd want to bring him down or force him to land. He had 2 choices, run or fight. Fighting was suicide. He barely knew how to fly this thing. He had no idea where the gun controls were. He didn't even know if the guns were loaded. He pushed the throttle forward and dove. The 109 accelerated. The airspeed climbed. 300 kilometers per hour. 350. 400. The engine roared. The airframe shook. He dropped through 2,000 feet. 1,500. The ground was coming up fast. He glanced back. The 2 109s were following. They were faster. Better pilots. They were closing the gap. Webb leveled out at 500 feet and turned hard left. He flew along a ridgeline, using the terrain to break their line of sight. He cut right around a hill. Left again through a valley. The 2 109s stayed with him. They were hurting him, trying to force him toward something. Then he saw what they were hurting him toward. An airfield. Large. Multiple runways. Hangars. Aircraft on the ground. A Luftwaffe base. The 2 109s wanted him to land there. They were trying to force him down. One of them was flashing his lights. The universal signal to follow. Land. Surrender. Webb kept flying. The lead 109 fired a warning burst. Tracer fire arced past Webb's canopy. Close enough to make the point. Land or we shoot you down. Webb made a decision. He couldn't outrun them. He couldn't outfight them. But maybe he could outthink them. He turned toward the airfield. He lowered what he thought was the landing gear lever. He heard the gear clank down. He reduced throttle. He lined up with the runway like he was coming in to land. The 2 109s pulled alongside him, one on each wing, escorting him in. The pilots were visible in their cockpits. One of them was gesturing, pointing down at the runway. Webb nodded. He gave a thumbs up. The pilots seemed satisfied. Webb was now 300 feet above the ground. The runway was straight ahead. 1,000 yards. 800. 600. The 2 escort 109s started to pull ahead, preparing to land first. Webb waited until they were 50 feet ahead of him. Then he shoved the throttle to full power, pulled back on the stick, and climbed. The 109 surged upward. The engine screamed. Webb banked hard right and dove back toward the deck. Behind him, the 2 escort pilots realized what had happened. They pulled up and turned to pursue. But Webb had a 5-second head start. He used it. He dropped to 100 feet and flew flat out toward the west. The airspeed climbed past 400 kilometers per hour. The ground was a blur beneath him. He flew over a road, a river, a village. Everything was happening too fast to process. The 2 109s were behind him again, closing. They were done being patient. One of them fired. Real fire this time. Not a warning. Cannon rounds hit the ground to Webb's left. He jinked right. More fire. Rounds walked up behind him. He was out of options. He couldn't outrun them. He couldn't shake them. They were going to kill him in the next 30 seconds. Then he saw the clouds. A low cloud bank was rolling in from the west. Thick. Gray. Maybe 500 feet off the ground. If he could reach it. If he could get inside before they shot him down. He aimed for the clouds and kept the throttle firewalled. The 109 was doing maximum speed at low altitude. The engine was redlining. The airframe was shaking like it wanted to come apart. 300 yards to the clouds. 200. The 109s fired again. Webb felt impacts. Something hit the tail. The aircraft shuddered but kept flying. 100 yards to the clouds. 50. He pulled up slightly and flew into the gray wall. Everything disappeared. The ground. The sky. The pursuing fighters. He was flying blind in thick cloud. No horizon. No visual reference. Just his instruments. Instruments he couldn't read. He held his heading. He kept the wings level by feel. The airspeed dropped as he throttled back. He couldn't fly maximum speed blind. He'd tear the wings off or hit the ground. He flew straight for 2 minutes. Then he turned north. Then west again. Then south. Random turns. Trying to lose the pursuit. Trying to make it impossible for them to predict where he'd come out. That interview has been shown at Air Force survival schools for 50 years. The lesson of Marcus Webb's escape isn't just about flying. It's about adaptability. About seeing an impossible situation and refusing to accept that it's impossible. About understanding that sometimes the only way out is through something you've never done before. Webb had never flown a German aircraft. He'd never stolen an enemy fighter. He'd never navigated without instruments across hostile territory. But when his life depended on it, he figured it out. Not because he was fearless. Not because he was lucky. But because he refused to give up. Because he kept moving. Because he adapted. His father had taught him that on a cattle ranch in Texas. Stay calm. Work the problem. Find the opening. Webb applied those lessons at 1,000 feet over Germany in an aircraft he'd never touched before. The result was one of the most audacious escapes of the entire war. The stolen Bf-109 was eventually restored and is now displayed at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. The placard next to it tells the story. Visitors stop and stare. They ask the same question every time. How did he do it? The answer is simple. He had to. If you enjoy real World War II stories, where skill and courage change history, subscribe for more. What would you do if survival meant flying an enemy aircraft you'd never touched, across a battlefield, with no map and no idea if you'd make it?